Thank you all for joining us for today's webcast, Neuron ESB Tips and Tricks, live product demo presented by Marty Wasznicky. My name is Meredith Mead, and I'm the Marketing Coordinator for Nudesic and the moderator for today's webcast. This webcast is presented by Marty Wasznicky, Nudesic's Director of Business Development. If you're all logged on, you should be able to see the title slide that states Neuron ESB Tips and Tricks Product Demo. There was a brief intro earlier regarding features within Live Meeting. To briefly recap, we encourage you to ask questions throughout the session by typing them in. To ask a question, click on the Q&A verbiage located in the toolbar on the top left side of your screen. Type your question, then click the Ask button. Please note all questions will be held until the end. We will also be using the seating chart feature within Live Meeting. Changing your feedback color within this tool provides feedback to the presenter. To provide feedback, click on the feedback menu found in the upper right-hand corner of your screen. Select your feedback color. Your seat in the conference center will display your selected color. Lastly, this webcast is being recorded and will be available via the Nudesic website. We will email you when the link is available. If everyone is ready, please make sure your seat color is green. At this time, I'd like to turn our presentation over to Marty.
Well, hello, everyone. Thank you for coming to Tips and Tricks. We're assuming with this presentation that you're either already a customer using Neuron today, or perhaps you're a developer and you're evaluating Neuron for a project that you might have. You can garner a lot of things from the documentation that we ship online. However, there are always just certain things that you just can't get from the documentation, and I hope to show you some of those today. We put together a little bit about myself. Director of Business Development here at Nudesic. I've been doing this kind of integration work for a long time, a couple of decades now. I was at Microsoft working in the Connected Systems Division, working with integration technologies like BizTalk and Host Integration Server, as well as ESB guidance. Spoken at conferences, written white papers, helped with books, so all sorts of fun in this space. We put together an agenda today. What I do want to do is cover what is Neuron ESB briefly, just in case some folks don't quite know. Then we'll go into the actual product demonstration around the tips and tricks. Specifically, we'll cover the WCFLOD Business Adapters, how you might use those with Neuron, what they are. We'll cover how you can leverage pipelines in a variety of different ways to build out solutions. We'll cover how Neuron works with services, as well as how do you troubleshoot these problems when they occur, what the event logs are, how you can get some good information from the message failures. Now, within all of this, we'll be working a lot with our client API, WCF, so you'll get a good mix of things. We'll follow this with a simple Q&A after. Now, Neuron ESB. When I think of Neuron ESB, I think of it as really an evolution of the integration and service space. So Neuron ESB, think of it as an integration server, a web service router, and a web service intermediary. What does that mean? That means we work to tie systems together, but not only that, to also make SOA development much easier and to provide the frameworks and the infrastructure you need to be successful. Our goal, though, with Neuron ESB was to build a product in such a way where you did not have to be an expert in any specific technology to use Neuron effectively. Our goal was not for companies to go out there and spend $1 million on custom consulting, but to be able to leverage the existing .NET development community out there for the ones that currently are employed by them. Now, a lot of things that Neuron provides, besides an integration platform and adaptive framework, really an answer to low latency messaging, making that integration problem very simple, providing a native .NET and WCF solution. WCF, very powerful, can be very complex. How do you expose that to your everyday .NET developer without them having to be a PhD in WCF? That was one of our goals. Introducing Topicbased Hub Sub as an intermediary between all the different service endpoints so that we can have a lot of flexibility with what we do. And topics become very intuitive. We also wanted to provide more event-based, broader Microsoft product integration. So when you think about Neuron and when you start looking at that, one of the things you'll see is you have a variety of plugins. One's for Dynamics CRM as well as SharePoint Server. The idea there is that you can configure integration in the bus directly from those applications without being an expert integration or knowing really that much at all about Neuron. We wanted to make it very simple. And we wanted it event-based, so when something happens, boom, you've got something on the bus, because why? People understand events, and that's typically when they want the information when it occurs. Being able to provide a true services gateway. You know, at the end of the day, you might have services that already exist, but somehow maybe you want to front those with a service that's WS Federation, WS HTTP, maybe a secure front end, and you really don't want to rewrite all your back-end services. Maybe you have different versions, so you need to be able to route to those different versions. You need to decommission other services in the future. Having a services gateway in the middle allows you to manage your services. So instead of managing and touching 1,000 different services, your clients now are really touching one, and you're just doing the routing behind the scenes. And obviously, ease of use was a big one for us. We want customers to be able to use this effectively on their own without hiring a league of consultants. Now, this next diagram is really about showing the server-side integration model. As you can see, the intermediary here is topic-based pub-sub. Messages can come in on certain topics, be routed to other topics, and tying into bus is as simple as using our distributed client API, web services that we host, our own adapters that we ship, custom adapters that you build, or even the WCF line of business adapters that Microsoft ships. Now, what makes Neuron very powerful is that we also have a client API. What does this mean? That means an intuitive API that .NET developers can use and host in their own applications and services. Now, this is kind of nice because why? As a developer, you can just create a publisher object and do a .send. Or you can create a subscriber object and hook into the on-receive event. At the end of the day, messages are traveling across this bus. They're being routed by the topics. And these topics could be powered by a variety of different transports. And when using the client API, you neither know nor care about those transports. We abstract all that. And you can take this client API, again, host it in your own applications, and wherever this API is hosted, that's where our pipelines run. And you either know or you will soon see our pipelines are pretty much stateless workflow where you can manipulate the message and do a variety of things. So let's go on with our first topic, the WCF line of business adapters. Really, what are these? These are adapters that Microsoft ships. You, of course, can create your own adapters. There is a WCFLOD SDK, not necessarily for the faint of heart, yet you can build your own. Microsoft ships these. They can be used with SQL Server, SharePoint, or BizTalk Server, or independently. They're purchased separately from BizTalk. And they provide a number of things. Obviously, connectivity to Oracle, SAP, SQL, and SQL. But they also do something we call metadata harvesting. They can actually scan the back end, say an SAP IDOC or BAPI function, and generate and expose a schema for that function. Well, through Neuron, we can do the same thing. So nice to be able to use these if they already exist. In our demo, we'll actually walk through how you set these up within Neuron and how you can use these within Neuron, showing that they're actually quite easy to implement. Not only that, we don't require you to compile a lot of things into assembly, so configuration, again, very easy. So let me go ahead and switch to the Neuron ESB Explorer, and just give me a moment. Okay. So what you're seeing right now, or what you should be seeing, is the Neuron ESB Explorer. I hope everyone can see this. Give me a moment here. Try this one more time. Fantastic. We've got the Neuron ESB Explorer. Now, what you'll find is I have a current configuration up. This is the main tool for working with Neuron. As you can see, I have a root topic just called SQL WCF Facade. I have a couple of subtopics specifically changed in .backend. You can see from this topic how it's configured. It's just configured to use the TCP transport. One of the power flexibility of Neuron is that it allows you to change the transport that these messages transferred and routed on. In this case, I could use TCP. I could always change it to MSMQ, peer, or a number of other different transports. And we'll keep it for TCP. I have the ability to encrypt everything on this topic as it's moving. So, easy to do. Now, I also have some publishers and subscribers set up. For this example, I have a publisher, since I'm going to show you how to set up the SQL adapter to actually publish information from SQL Server into the bus so any subscriber can get it. And then I also have a subscriber set up. And the subscriber is going to be associated with another instance of the SQL line of business adapter so that I can send requests to the SQL Server, maybe a stored proc or select statement saying, give me this customer that matches X, and return that back. One of the things that we'll be doing later is showing, well, once you have this set up, an adapter endpoint, how easy it is for other clients now to call and use SQL Server through Neuron, as well as even exposing it as a web service. If I take a look under connections, how we set up the adapters are fairly simple. WCF line of business adapters as well as Neuron adapters are set up through the adapter leaf and the ESB configuration. If I click on any one of those, one of the things that you will see is the family is WCF. I can pick whatever WCF adapters are installed on the box. In this case, I've got SQL. And then I have property grid that I can fill out with specific binding properties. And all of these properties are well documented within the line of business adapter help file. I can put in all my connection info, the database, the server, and then I can even retrieve metadata. If I have Windows here, I can import metadata. And what do I have? A number of things. All the stored procs within that table. I could add that to an import. And I'm assuming everyone was able to see the connection wizard. If not, let me go ahead and do that again. I'll just share my desktop this time. Perfect. So here we have the WCF. I just clicked on the import metadata button, clicked on a stored proc, did an add, import, and now I have schemas added. If I go to data and I go to XML schemas, notice I have a set of schemas that were added in. Let me just expand that, and you can see the information set up. And you have the schemas that you can access, you can use to validate information. Hence you have even the action ID if you need the action. And we'll be using things like the action later in our demo. So once you have the adapter set up, and again, it's as simple as hitting new, picking your adapter type. If it was .NET, I could pick one of the ones that we ship. If it's WCF, I could pick a WCF adapter. Now, once I have all these adapters set up, essentially WCF line of business adapters, they are web services. So we set these up a little differently than you would, say, a Neuron adapter. If we were setting up a Neuron adapter, I'll just go ahead and create a MQ adapter very quickly. Goes for MQ, hit apply. Now, if I was going to create an adapter instance, with Neuron adapter, I would typically just hit new and pick the adapter and it would show up. But since these are services, what I do now is I go into service endpoints and I literally define a service endpoint that would use that adapter. In this case, let's look at the ones I have set up. I set up a service endpoint. I used the SQL WCF adapter defined under connection methods adapter. Notice it's request reply because this is going to be a service provider for the bus. I should be able to send out requests to the database and get an answer back. So I have the binding, and the only other thing I need to set up at that point is the service connector. Notice the URL address. This is specific to the line of business adapter. This, MS SQL, tells the system to use the SQL line of business adapter. I have to specify the server that I'm targeting. It could be on a completely different machine, and the database I'm targeting. And notice I have the subscriber ID. And this subscriber ID, if you remember, is subscribing to the .backend subtopic. Now, if I take a look at some of these others, these are actually hosted web service endpoints by Neuron. And if I enable these, what will happen is it will actually call polling function to bring information from the SQL Server, publish it in the Neuron, so that anyone on the bus can actually receive that information. The only difference here is I'm simply calling a different adapter binding I created under the connection methods adapters. And instead of setting up a service connector, I'm setting up a client connector. Again, now this is a service endpoint hosted by the Neuron ESB service. I have a publisher ID, and I just simply publish the information to the change topic, and notice the same URL syntax. This tells me it's SQL line of business. This has to be the Neuron server itself, the machine name. And then the database, actually, this is the machine name I'm pulling against, so this could be a remote server. And this is the database on that remote server. Now, since this is a one-way submit to the database, the only thing I change here is the messaging pattern is now a datagram rather than the request response. So how would I test something like this? Well, pretty simple. We ship test tools. I can bring up a test client very quickly. Here we go. This test client uses our distributed client API. That's all it does. I already have a subscriber set up as a test subscriber that can basically submit and subscribe to all the information on the bus. Notice this. If I come in here to show you the subscriber one more time, it's test party. Test party can send and receive on every topic and subtopic. So what I want to do is query SQL Server system through bus. I want to send a bus a message, and the bus should know that this is a query message, and I should forward this to that service endpoint, which is the WCF line of business adapter for SQL Server. So I'm going to send it. I need to send it to the backend subtopic. If this is a request response, then I know I need to change the semantic to request. I'll be sending XML. So now what I'm missing is what should the message format be, and this is well documented in the LOB documentation, and what the action should be. Well, we saw the action previously in the schema, and so what I did, I just stored some information here in our document repository, and I'll just do a simple select from a phone book. So the syntax for that looks just like this, and again, well documented, and the action is fairly simple, table. I put the action in, I hit send, and notice I receive my response. And this is the response from the actual database. I could change this up and say I want to call a stored proc. Well, the format for that is this. The root name is the name of the stored proc. You have a different namespace, and you're passing in the arguments. I'll come here, and now what I need, though, is a different action. I'll come back, do the action, hit send, and now I get a different response message that not only includes the message, but the schema at the forefront. And here we have the message. So again, remember, WCF line of business adapters are inherently services. So I called this to the test client. Now, how would I go ahead and say, call this as a .NET developer? Well, as a .NET developer, I could go ahead and let me now share out Visual Studio. There we are. Now you should be able to see visualstudio.net. Now, as a developer, maybe I don't want to do a lot of work. One of the things you can do is use our ESB Explorer. I can open this up, look at the current config. There we have it. And one of the things I'll need to do is, although I already referenced the Neuron libraries here, I'll need an app.config file. I'll just right-click on messaging and say add an application config file, which points to the current Neuron ESB service. I'll add a reference up here using Neuron.esb. Fantastic. And what do I need to do? Well, I can just go ahead and I have a publisher. I'm just going to go ahead and do something as simple as that, just bring the code right in so that I don't have to type it all from scratch. Kind of a nice functionality of using the ESB Explorer. Notice I've just created a publisher object of a test party I've connected, and like with anything, hey, a connect method could bring back errors, so we can always catch those there. Now, by default, when we're sending a message, what are we sending? Well, we're sending something that's multicast. So one of the things we do want to do is change this to a request reply message. So we can change the send option here to request. Pretty simple. We don't need a schema. And I've got this. Now, one of the things I've got to do is I've got to change the topic to backend. I believe that is what we changed it to. Perfect. I need to change my message, and I also need to change my action. So let's see how we would do this. First, let's change the action. We'll just do a select statement, and we're using the same action that we put in our test client. Does that make sense? Now we'll go ahead, and we just need the message. So let's go ahead and bring in the message here. There we go. So notice I have my message, a select statement. I'm sending that message in. Now again, I should be returning a message. So that means I need ESB message, reply, equals, and then let's go ahead and console.writeLine, reply to string, perfect. So here I am using the client API to do what? Simply call that SQL adapter. Right? So in this case, the publisher is simply publishing, connecting to the bus, publishing a message to the bus, and it's going to expect a reply. I'm writing it to the console. If I go ahead and run this now, oh, hold on here. We got one important thing. We are, and I bet you cannot actually see that, so I'll have to change this real quick. Let me go in here, get my arguments correct. There's a schema I'm missing here. I've got my semantic, and time.now. Okay, so here I just need to get my arguments right. Let's do reply, send message, message, perfect. If I go ahead and run this, all right, give me just a moment here. And it looks like I'm missing a closing statement. Here we go. Add formatted message. Now we have it, and it looks like I need to share my entire desktop so that you'll see this. Let's go back in here and share the desktop. Now we run it, and voila, I get my message. So pretty simple to do. Again, publisher, connect to the bus, create the message, make sure that the entire message is there, do a send XML, and here the syntax is just topic, message, action, and what do we have? Our other argument is simply the schema, the option, basically changing it from a multicast to a request, the target ID, which is none, and the current date time. Now, let's go ahead, unshare this, go back to our presentation, oh, forgot one thing. Let's actually go back now to the desktop again. Wanted to show you one last thing with this. We saw, obviously, sending. What happens when we go in here, adapter endpoint, service endpoint? What happens if I simply enable this? Well, let's bring up our test client, connect again. Perfect. Let me clear this on the receive side. And we'll just enable this. Now what's happening, I'll hit apply. If we go in the adapter for this, and we take a look at the binding configuration, one of the things that you'll see is it's calling a stored procedure. So if I hit save, we can go into activity under endpoint health. We can see our endpoints running. And notice my test client just got a message. All the data. And it's going to continue getting those messages. So very easy to work with the line of business adapters. Let me switch back. Tips and tricks. So, what did we just see? We saw the WCF line of business adapters. We know we set them up as adapters first, and then we use them as service endpoints. These are actually services within Neuron at that point. We can easily expose that using our client API to submit messages. We could even expose it later. We might just do that as a service on-ramp. Very easy to query SQL at that point. Very easy to get things out of SQL and even pull it. So the next section we want to cover is neuron pipelines. Now, neuron pipelines are very powerful. They provide stateless complex message processing. What does that mean? That means I can intercept a message anytime I'm receiving something from the bus or sending something from the bus. So receiving, sending to, I can intercept the message, party on all the data, change it, access properties, access SOAP, and do a lot of different message processing. Maybe I need to call a database, call another web service, make some decisions, call some rules, even write some standard code. I can do all this with the neuron pipelines and even expose it as a service. So how easy is this to do? Let's take a look. I'm going to go back just to the desktop. Let's go back to the ESB Explorer. Perfect. I'm assuming everyone can see this. Fantastic. Let's go here. Obviously, I don't need this anymore. Hit save. So one of the things I might want to do is simply create a new topic to test with. Very easy to do. Services, and we'll create a processor subtopic. Fantastic. We'll just accept all the defaults. And we'll go ahead and create a new publisher for this. In fact, we can use this current publisher. Doesn't really matter. Let's go ahead and add a subscription. Notice I'll just give it all rights. Test party it is. Fantastic. Now I can go ahead from there. We can create another subscriber for testing purposes, but we really need to. Let's go ahead and create a pipeline. And really what we want to do with this pipeline is set it up in a way where it's going to modify the message and it's just simply going to send me that reply right back without publishing it to the bus. So in that case, let's go ahead and say just create a new subscriber here, subscriber 1, and I'm going to say fantastic, I can receive on these. Receive, hit apply, save. I'm just going to go ahead and use a test client and connect with that new subscriber. In the background here. But now let's go ahead and let's create a simple pipeline. Fantastic. So I can go ahead and do this. Just flip a code shape in. That's simple. Very powerful what you can do with this. Let's open up the code editor. I have access to the entire message. So hence I can do something like this. Data from XML. In this case, I'm just going to overwrite the existing message that comes in. XML, and I'll say, this is your reply. Simple as that. And I'll put a cancel shape in, basically saying don't publish this to the bus. And I'll just call it a processor pipeline for now. I'll hit apply. Pretty simple. And now if I go in here, I can take that and I can only add it to this publisher. Here we go. On client published. Now what that means is the next time I call test party will actually execute that pipeline and return back whatever message I just put in there, but it will not publish it to the bus. Now, I'll go ahead and save this configuration. And now let's go ahead and just share the desktop again and see what happens when we run into Visual Studio. Let me go back into one, and notice I have the test party, I'm connecting, here I have SQL backend, that's okay. Doesn't really matter what topic I'm publishing to, doesn't really matter what action, doesn't even matter what the message is. You'll find what the reply will be very different now, because the test party has that pipeline. And what I've done here is I've connected to the subscriber who can connect to services. In fact, let's just go ahead and I want to make sure that goes to services. So we can see that now this will not be published to the bus. Services, nothing on the receive side. And if I go ahead and run this, I get my reply message. And that's the reply I configured within my pipeline. Pretty simple to do this. Now, what if I wanted to add some metadata to this? Add a custom property into a pipeline and be able to access that later on? Well, I can do that as well. First, to add some metadata to this, we just need to modify this code and even modify our method. One of the first things we have to do is create an ESB message now. Let's do that. ESB message. Perfect. Equals new ESB message. Fantastic. And one of the things we have to do is specify our topic here. Message.header. Oh, I have two of those. Let me just go ahead and do request. Request header.topic. And that is going to equal services. Request dot semantic. Equals semantic dot request. And then let's go ahead and say request dot from XML. Again, it's just simple as that. And now instead of this, all we're going to do is, don't need this anymore, let's comment it out. And now we have ESB message reply equals publisher.send message request. It's really, really that simple. Now what we want to do is set a property before we send it. So it's going to be request dot set property, and our prefix is going to be something as simple as neuron, and it's going to be something as prop, and let's just do some value. So now what I've done is I've set some metadata over here. I'm sending the message, getting the reply, writing it back. And now, what would I do to catch that metadata? Open up my pipeline, edit this pipeline, and it's going to be as simple as let's do string value context.data get property, and it's simply going to be just like we had it here, prop, done. And now let's go ahead and just write this to the log. Diagnostics. Log. Write entry. Pipeline. Value. Log entry type. Let's just do warning, and let's do 5,000. Fantastic. So pretty simple to do that. All I'm doing is retrieving the value, writing it to the log. So now if I do something as this, hit save, apply, save. If I have my event log up, let me clear that very quickly. I'll just go ahead and run this again, or run this now. This is your reply, and I get writing to the event log. So very easy to do. Now what if we wanted to expose this as a web service itself? Again, very easy to do. Let's go ahead and see what we have to do that. And again, let's just go over the metadata part. Very common to do in integration scenarios. You need to be able to send metadata dynamically. You need to be able to catch it on the inside and do some custom processing with it. Very important. So now to expose this pipeline as a web service, what would I do? Well, I can simply go back into connections, and we saw Neuron has the ability to host web service endpoints. Well, sure does. So let's bring up a generic on-ramp. We can call it Service 1 right now. We can say it's basic HTTP. We know it's going to be request reply. And all I do is set this up. Let me make sure this is disconnected for now. I'll enable the client connector. I always capture custom headers just in case I want to use them later. And this is just simply going to be test party. Remember, test party has the pipeline associated with it. I can go ahead and publish this to a topic. This will actually never happen now because why? The pipeline has a cancel shape. And I'll just simply say HTTP : //. This is going to be localhost : 9001. That is going to be the endpoint it's going to call. If I hit apply, hit save, great. I have some activity. I can go into endpoint health, and I can start to monitor. And what do I have? I have a new client endpoint up and running. Fantastic. How would I call that? Well, I could go right back into this client code, and instead of using the publisher object, I can just use WCF. In fact, I have some WCF code already written. Notice it's using channel factory. It already has the URL. Let me go ahead and stop this. Great. Already has the URL in it. Notice I'm just sending hello world. I'm creating the message. I'm sending it, and I'm writing the reply. So to do this, simple as that. Perfect. So again, now I'm going to go ahead and call just some WCF code channel factory, iRequest channel, and it's actually calling the service hosted by Neuron. That service is now attached to the party, which is running our custom pipeline. I'll go ahead and start that. And what do I have? This is your reply. Very simple. Now, if I wanted to, I could do some other things as well. I could say route back to maybe the SQL endpoint. We could go ahead and change that. Let's go ahead and write some. Let's do this. Copy this back over here. Let's change the action. Here we go. And we're still missing our select. Our end tag. We can just comment out that. So now what do I have? I have it still going to the endpoint. What do I have? I have my select statement against the SQL store in the background, and I have this action. But our problem is it's still going to run that pipeline, and that pipeline is still going to just do what? Return us this result. This is your reply. So now I can go into the pipeline. I can modify that fairly easily. We have this. Well, let's put a decision shape on this. I could say, now, how about this? Return. Does the action, let's see here, I could do the return, and does the dot header, dot action. Something as simple as that. If it equals that, go down this branch, which means the message is going to come in. If it equals, it will go down here. Otherwise, we'll just do the same cancel kind of thing and return a reply. And in here, the only thing I really need to do is I need to flip the topic. So I could do context.data.header.topic equals SQL WCF decide dot back end. Should be that simple. Let's make sure I actually have it spelled correctly. Let's go back into hit save, apply, go into messaging. Everything is scan, edit. Make sure it's spelled perfectly. Fantastic. So now what we're saying is message comes in. If the action equals X, go down this path. Hey, if it equals Y, then just go ahead and send back the reply and don't even publish the message. I publish. And what do I have? If I run this now, I get my SQL information. And yet, if I change the action to something not in that decision shape, then I get my default reply. So again, pretty easy to work with services. You can pretty much do anything within a pipeline, including writing custom code. Nothing required to be compiled, so no assemblies to deploy. We centrally manage these pipelines and serialize them out to wherever the client's running. You can create, send, access custom properties within a pipeline with the client code. You can access and expose the pipeline as a web service. You can prevent publication to the bus. So this is an incredible extensibility point. And you can also do some interesting routing just like we did. Now, what about using custom subheaders? Same thing, you can access those within the pipeline, and we'll show you that next. So now let's go back to the presentation. Okay, here we are. So we saw that, demonstrated it. Now services within Neuron, again, lots of things. You can create generic on-ramps. They're type agnostic. These are services hosted by Neuron. We can route a number of different ways to the back end. We automatically do protocol mediation, so you don't have to. And you can do a number of interesting routing. You saw so far routing by topic, routing by action. So there's other ways to route and even circumvent the bus altogether. The key there is when you're working with services, you want to always be thinking about mapping subtopics to services. Always doing that. So let's move on and take a look at that fairly quickly. I'll go ahead and share my desktop once again. Let's go ahead and bring up a different Neuron ESB configuration. Here we go. Services. I'll simply restart and reconnect. So in this case, we'll show you datagrams and SOAP headers and protocol mediation, as well as different routing that you can do. Now, if you're already using this, you know services, easy as just simply an import. When you connect, notice I have a topic already, services, and notice the subtopics, one-way, two-way. If I click on the subscriber leaf, I have my publisher That's going to represent my generic on-ramps. But then I have a one-way subscriber that subscribes to the one-way. This will be mapped to our one-way service running. And then a two-way, mapped to our two-way service running. To do this, I have two services, or WCF services hosted. I can launch these right now. Let's launch one. Let's launch the other. So two console apps, two web services, just listening, and they'll write whatever they get onto their console. And in the case of the two-way, it'll actually send me back a response. If I look on the connections, look how I have these set up. First, my on-ramps. I have a one-way on-ramp defined, WSHTP. One-way just means datagram was set for binding. And notice the client address. Okay, and that's the service publisher. And on my two-way, it's just a different URL, same publisher. Binding is request response. And again, WSHTTP. Now these, if I submit these things will be routed. What we're going to do is route them to the appropriate back-end service. If I look at my one-way service, one-way, it's basic HTTP, datagram. Obviously the semantic, the message pattern, has to match. And the service connector is something simple as this. Now the two-way, pretty much same configuration. And notice it's using the two-way subscriber versus the one-way subscriber. And notice everything has custom headers enabled. Okay, importing a service, pretty simple. Put in the URL, hit import, and notice something endpoint, I save it. And I get a something endpoint, and it does all the work for you, including all the configuration. Not too hard to do. Okay, notice no pipelines yet. That's fantastic. So, let's go ahead and create a pipeline so that we can send in the message and route to the right service. So, navigate the pipeline, already have one open. We'll call this the router. Fantastic. And I'm going to do something as simple as a code shape again. And in this case, I'm just going to check and route by the semantic. So, let me just go in here. Again, I edit. If context.data.header.semantic equals neuron.esb.semantic, and that is request. Then we'll do something else. We'll do something else. Here we go. First thing we'll do is we'll simply do the topic flip. Services dot two-way. That is the name of the topic. And of course here, it's one way. Pretty simple to implement. I'll hit apply. The only thing I need to do now is go into messaging, my publisher, my service publisher, and simply set it up. Hit apply, save, I'm done. Now if I go into my sample API code, notice I have some WCF samples already written up. And again, they're just using Channel Factory going against the client connectors we set up, the generic on-ramps, to submit messages. So now, console.write line, there we go. If I do a request response, or whether I even do a one-way, these will always get routed to the right services. I could run this, and notice, here we go, and here we go. So, hello two-way, hello two-way, continue running, and I also have my hello datagram service. Pretty simple to do. Now, if I wanted to circumvent this altogether, I could circumvent the bus and actually route direct. So this is a simple router, semantic. You can do a lot of things with this. Well, let's try routing by circumventing the bus this time around. And again, circumventing the bus, this just means now I'm going to route by name. So let me go into pipelines, change this fairly quickly. Context dot. Data set property this time, and we're going to use a special property of Neuron. Direct, connect, to, and let's go ahead and say what? This is going to be the two-way echo service. So notice I'm actually calling the service connector by name. Do the same here. 1, 2, 3, one way. And we'll make sure this doesn't get published to the bus because we'll simply add a cancel shape. I'll apply, I'll hit save. Fantastic. And if I run these again, notice here, and notice I have my messages yet again. So all works, this time faster because I'm not publishing to the bus. So again, you can do quite a bit of work with this. So let's go on. You can go back to the presentation here. We're covering a lot of material. So we saw we can do quite a bit with services. Generic on-ramps, mediation, routing, properties. Now, when you're troubleshooting, one of the nice things we give you is the endpoint health monitor. You can see everything that's up or down. Anytime I create a client connector, service connector, adapter endpoint, a topic, I always simply go into the endpoint health monitor to make sure everything is green. Next thing, you can enable the database so you have full message tracking, and when messages fail, they go in the failure database. And we have our event logs, Neuron logs, and WCF tracing. So let's see how we can enable this very quickly. I'll go ahead, share my desktop yet again. And let's see here. Let's go into Neuron. First, configuration. If you go into configuration server, you have a lot of options. Tracing options. These determine what gets written to the Windows event log, as well as what gets written to the old Neuron log, and enable WCF tracing. There's going to be large files involved here, so only enable it if you're having an issue. Endpoint health. Notice endpoint health, I can see everything currently running and what's green. Now I can get this exact same view by calling the iMaster control interface and just maybe creating my own web dashboard on this. So hence, I did that as well, and I can browse and I can see the exact same information. Always refreshing. The information for that is very simple to see. If I come in here, add a project, Neuron monitoring, view the code. The only significant code behind here is this, calling the master control service. And then it's just grabbing the data and appending. So in other words, you can access it within Neuron ESB Explorer, or you can build your own website around this. Okay. For the event logs, we started a Neuron ESB event log. This will show all the information from the server, and applications will write any information from, say, the client APIs. If I navigate down to Program Files Logs, every time when you restart the service, you get logs. We create a log for every service internally as well as every service connector. Two-way service, getting all your information in here. Anytime there's an issue, we'll want these logs. And lastly, if I wanted to enable database tracking, Easy to do. Database, hit new, localhost, new DB for auditing, pick your deployment group, hit apply, and the database simply gets created. Once you do that, you can assign it to a topic. Enabled, hit apply, hit save, and now you have auditing. You have other things as well, though. I can see who's currently connected to the system, and then any messages that run. If I ran this again, perfect. I can go in, active sessions, see who was connected, and let me go ahead and run this one more time. Perfect. Sure, my dates are right. And I think I'm still, actually need to restart the service for this. One more check. Let's just restart. Oh, of course. What are we doing? We're circumventing the bus. It's starting up. Great. Let's remove that. Let's edit the code here. Let's not circumvent the bus so we can have some auditing happening for us. I'll hit apply, hit save, save our pipeline. Easy to do. Great. Activity. And message history. And I have all my messages, including any metadata associated with them. So quite a number of things. So going back, a lot of things you can do, no matter what. First step is always check the endpoint health monitor. Go up. Check the endpoint health monitor. Always enable message tracking. Event log, then Neuron logs, and then if you're running into serious problems with your services, it's WCF tracing. So that concludes our session. So great support for WCF line of business adapters out of the box. I'd argue they're much easier to use with Neuron than any other technology. We don't require you to compile schemas, anything into assemblies, or do any kind of deployment. Pipelines are just a great extensibility point within Neuron. You can do pretty much anything within those, including writing custom code, and there's nothing for you to deploy, nothing for you to compile. And no matter where the Neuron client is running, we will serialize down always the most recent pipelines. So even if you have clients deployed on remote machines, you don't have to worry about it. They'll always be running and be up to date. Publishing metadata through pipelines and accessing that is great, whether you're using SOAP or whether our client API. Using Neuron for services to do the protocol mediation, the generic on-ramps, being able to extract those back-end web services, I think is essential to adopting SOA successfully within the company. Anytime you're dealing with hundreds of thousands of things, you have to have a way to provide the infrastructure to simplify that. Be able to decommission them when you have to and version those things. And then tracing, auditing, and failed message support, completely configurable. You can access more information on the Neuron site, and you can also email us. Well, I want to thank you. Open for Q&A.
Thanks, Marty. We did have a question come through. How can I use Client API?
So the beauty of the Client API is that you can host it in your own applications. Literally what you saw, I created a publisher object. You can also create a subscriber object and literally hook into the on-receive event. So now you're receiving messages in real time as they happen. We have a lot of customers that will take that API, they'll embed it in their own Windows applications, they'll embed it in web services, even hosted by AppFabric, IS7 basically. I've seen customers take our API and host it in their own NT services. Their idea is they want to be able to get this information as it happens right away, do something with it. In other cases, you can use our API to build some pretty robust event-based mechanisms within the third-party applications. We did this ourselves with our own SharePoint plugin and our dynamic CRM plugin. Very versatile and very .NET developer-friendly.
Thanks, Marty. That sounded very helpful. If anyone has any more questions, please feel free to type them in at this time. In the meantime, I'm going to click through a few polling questions, and we greatly appreciate your feedback. The first question, was this content helpful for your business? Yes or no? Wait a few more seconds for everyone. Great, thank you. Second question, please rate the presentation content. Excellent, good, or poor? Great, thank you everyone. Last question, would you like us to schedule a follow-up? Yes or no? Great, thank you. If there are no further questions, we'd like to thank Marty again for the wonderful presentation. We will be forwarding out the recorded version of this presentation when it becomes available. If you have any further questions about this presentation, please feel free to email Marty at the email address provided on the slide. Again, thank you so much everyone for joining us today, and we look forward to seeing you on our next webcast. You are now free to disconnect. Thank you.